Super excited about this topic, as we were kind of thinking through, sort of where to focus our time and effort and how to help folks this month. We know that so many people are in the midst of budget discussions for 2026. And so we wanted to give you some really actionable strategies, particularly around amenity budgeting, to help you make some really data-driven decisions and kind of come to leadership with some data-backed budgets this year that will get passed right through for approval and leverage a lot of that data that you're already sitting on. So we figured because so many of our clients are in the midst of these budget discussions, we would kind of focus our time and energy here and hopefully, give you some good strategies to make your budgeting process this year a little bit easier than it has been. So we will dive right in here. Definitely, as you have questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. I'll make sure to get to them at the end there. So don't be shy, throw the questions in there. We'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A, and let's get going. So, the $50,000 question here is, what if most of your amenity budget is going towards features that residents don't actually value? So often we see folks, having to make amenity calls kind of based on assumptions, instead of letting their data really be the guide here for where to spend those dollars. And these are huge, sort of big budget items that can mean tens of thousands of dollars. And so we want to make sure that these investments are, the most data-driven, they're going to be the most efficient use of our dollars, and drive the biggest impact on NOI and occupancy. And so the fear is that, what if we have these tens of thousands of dollars going towards amenities, that don't actually drive lease renewals, while things that we could be investing in are actually getting no investment. And so this is kind of the perfect time to think about this and really dig into some of your data, because a lot of these budget meetings are already happening. So many of our clients are in the midst of these meetings. Leadership has asked for these budgets. They're kind of trying to dig into 2025 data, kind of what they've seen so far this year. And so we want to give you, some really useful strategies for preparing those initial budgets, going into these meetings really, really confident with sort of what you have to present, and a budget that will get approved. And more what we're seeing too, and a lot of what our clients are telling us, is that there's more intense pressure than ever, particularly from leadership, to justify every dollar they spend. We know that acquisition costs are rising, just the economic climate in general, the uncertainty there. They are under a lot of pressure to really be able to justify, every line item on that budget. And so, we want to give you the ammo to go into these meetings and be so confident and be able to justify, kind of what you're bringing. And again, with those acquisition costs rising, we know that retention is more important than ever. We want to attract the right type of residents that will actually stay and renew leases, and help us make sure that our occupancy is staying high, and we're not having that turnover. So, this is the time to start digging into your 2025 data, go into these budget meetings really, really prepared and with this sort of great data-backed strategy that you can present. And traditionally, there's no exact science to budgeting. We see our clients kind of do it all sorts of different ways. They use different formulas. And often we're just sort of looking back at, okay, what did we spend last year on amenities? Let's add a little bit for inflation. And, our team has been saying the fitness center really needs updating. We've been getting a lot of feedback about parking sort of anecdotally from our residents. Let's start there. But the problem with that approach is that often we're funding assumptions or kind of doing it the way that we have done, rather than really looking at our performance data and digging into areas where there might be sort of hidden places where we could be seeing a lot of value, that are getting passed over. So the goal here is to move away from that sort of assumption-based budgeting process and move towards something that's super data-driven, where we're really listening to what our residents are telling us, and finding those hidden trends that could mean, much more efficient use of our amenity dollars. And there's a big, sort of hidden cost to not looking into that data and really, really listening to what our residents are telling us, which is there could be a lot of wasted spend. Again, these are really, sort of high investment areas often. And so all of a sudden we may have spent, upwards of $20,000 on a fitness center that only 12% of our residents are using. And while it looks really great on the marketing materials, the actual use patterns of our residents are much lower and kind of tell a different story. Again, we might be missing opportunities. Kind of some of those less flashy amenities might be really, really well perceived by our residents. Parking improvements could retain 30% more residents, but, we're kind of going for the flashier, more marketing, first items here and missing some of those opportunities that actually could be driving much more retention. Again, sort of lower renewal rates. If we're not investing in some of those more functional amenities that residents really value, they may end up leaving for competing properties because they're seeing these valued amenities deteriorate over time and not seeing the investment there that they want. And a big one is marketing misalignment. So often we might be promoting amenities that look great on our marketing materials, or traditionally have been these sort of big keystone amenities that we want to place forth, but they may not be the things that are actually driving decisions. And so we could be spending our marketing dollars so much more efficiently on the amenities that residents actually care about and have a really positive perception of. But we're sort of missing those trends in the data. Luckily, you're sitting on a data gold mine. You have so much data, that can tell the story of what residents really value, where to be spending those amenity dollars, sort of hidden areas that we might not traditionally think of when we think of amenity investment. The story is there in your data. It's just about digging through to really find that. Um, and so you have these amazing resident communications, all of your move out surveys from this year already, all of those maintenance requests that have come in, any complaints that our team has been dealing with, all of those lease renewal conversations between our team and residents, all of that, is hiding this story. And so it's just about kind of going in and digging through and starting to understand those trends. Again, our online reputation data, all of those Google reviews, that we're trying to respond to and kind of dig through and understand, Yelp and Facebook, even social media mentions, the way that folks are talking about our communities, on social media or commenting on things, can tell a really interesting story that then becomes, the basis of our 2026 budget. And again, all that behavioral data that we have around who actually renewed, what types of residents renewed, who didn't, those amenity usage patterns, how often are we seeing these amenities used, what was our investment in them over the last year, and our satisfaction survey responses, kind of asking residents directly, is a really easy way to start to build this picture. And so sitting on those survey responses, now it's sort of about triangulating all this data, kind of digging in to find the stories. And that's really where AI can help us. It's overwhelming, the amount of data often that we're sitting on, and just the amount of resident communications and social media mentions, that we would have to sort through to try and find this picture. And so one area that I'm finding myself kind of using AI more and more for is that data analysis at scale. I could kind of go through all these calls or this feedback one by one and try to find these patterns, but it's going to take me, many more hours than sort of asking AI, which can analyze something like 500 or more pieces of feedback in just a few minutes. And so AI is really changing the way that we do a lot of our roles. And I think data analysis is a big one, especially for folks who are, like me, super data minded. This is a huge sort of way that it can jump me ahead and start to pull out these trends rather than having me sort through it manually. And you don't need kind of fancy tools to do this. Using the free version of ChatGPT and Claude, they're great tools for this. They're built to analyze this data at scale. They're super easy and intuitive to use. You can literally copy and paste and upload there. You don't need any special training or any sort of BI tools to do this. There are great free tools out there that can get you, really, really far in terms of your analysis. And we're seeing more and more PMS, platforms in particular build these AI tools in there to make it even easier. So there's no copy and pasting, you can kind of tap into this data right there in the platform. And so, make sure you're thinking about that too. And sort of some of the systems that you have today, are there already places you could go in and sort of leverage AI to do some of this analysis? So there are three sort of big areas that we would recommend, as you're starting to think through how to identify these trends and patterns, how to build your amenity budget. The first place we would recommend starting is definitely that communication analysis. Those are such valuable, that's such a gold mine of data around, how residents think and feel about these amenities. And so take all of those surveys that you've collected, feedback forms from residents, maintenance requests, anywhere that they're actively kind of talking about amenities. And you can literally copy and paste that right into a tool like ChatGPT and use a simple prompt like this to start getting some of these insights. So it does a great job kind of pulling out sentiment. So that's a really easy way here to start, identify the top 5 most frequently mentioned amenities and then which receive the most positive sentiment. It does a great job with its sort of language learning model, both Claude and ChatGPT, of being able to say, okay, these are really positive, communications about this amenity versus, okay, here's more negative sentiment around it. It can also do more advanced analysis, like actually correlate some of these communications with lease renewal decisions. So if you have your leasing data, attached to these surveys, it can actually start to find, the connection between them and say, the folks who had really positive sentiment around these amenities went on to renew, whereas the folks who had more negative sentiment, didn't. Um, and the ranking, so all of a sudden now you've been able to sort of identify maybe 5 big areas that you want to start thinking about just from copy and pasting a lot of that survey data in there. So definitely starting with that, the sort of communication analysis is a great place to start. From there, definitely, that social media and review mining is a huge area that we would recommend, kind of leveraging here. We know our online reputation is super important, kind of generating those Google reviews. And so whether they're positive or negative, they're hiding a ton of data about how residents feel about our amenities. And so really getting a full picture is something that AI can help us do. And you can literally, again, copy and paste from Google. You don't have to kind of go through any big processes there. You can copy and paste the Google reviews, let's say from the last 12 months. You could even go smaller time frames, like 3 months or 6 months. Pull those Yelp mentions, anything on Nextdoor that you're seeing, anything from Instagram, and have AI categorize all of those online mentions quickly by amenity type, and again, rank by that positive and negative sentiment. So now we kind of have the trends identified in our communication data. Now we're starting to identify those trends in our social media and review mining. And we're starting to be able to triangulate here and spot the patterns that are happening across kind of both big areas here. And I kind of went through the exercise to do this using this exact prompt just to give you a sense for what it can do. So, all of a sudden, we've taken something like, 50 or 100 Google reviews and had AI actually pull out, what are the positive mentions happening here? What are some of those big key categories, that we might want to start looking at in terms of amenity investment for next year? So for this community, location and views were 2 that got those positive mentions across the board. What ChatGPT can do for you too is actually pull out some of those important quotes. So all of a sudden we're getting, some meat to use in our marketing posts here. It's actually pulling out, some of those exact phrases that people have used to help us get a sense for it. Okay, what exactly are they sort of positively mentioning about location? And can give us that overall kind of net sentiment score. We're seeing no negative mentions on these things, so that's an indication that these are really positive, assets that we want to make sure we're promoting and kind of thinking about, how we invest in. And again, for this particular community, there were a couple of less positive areas here where, now we're starting to get a sense for, these are areas where we might need a little bit more investment. And how can we start to kind of bring this to our teams and think about ways that we can improve this? So, something like 3 negative mentions, maybe we want to set a threshold for, 5 or more is when we'll really bring it to our team or start to think about this as, sort of a budget area for next year. But something like 6 or more, this might be a clear area that we need to do a little bit of investment in, kind of dig into, identify some more trends here and figure out how we can, actually start to change these things. So this is, taken all of this data that would have, taken us hours reading through all these Google reviews, kind of trying to find these trends, and really quickly given us some of those big buckets to start thinking about, as we budget for next year. The third sort of big, keystone area that we would recommend, leveraging AI for is that behavioral pattern analysis. So all of our lease renewal rates by unit type and location, the move out reasons that we've collected in those surveys, all of our maintenance requests, categorizing them by frequency and amenity, and our satisfaction scores. Now we can really dig into the sort of renewal data and occupancy data and start to figure out the correlation, between retention. How do we dig into this data and actually figure out the amenities that are driving retention for each community, and then really lean into those in terms of our budget for 2026. And our goal here is, triangulate these three things together. And when all three of these methods agree, when they're showing the same types of trends, that's when we have a really clear budget priority confirmed. So let's say, our communications, we're seeing huge number of parking mentions. Folks are talking about parking, their assigned parking space, how awesome that is. Social media, we're seeing, okay, people who don't have an assigned parking space we're seeing a lot of complaints there. It's the number one move out reason, that we were seeing so far in 2025. And then kind of digging into that renewal data, wow, it looks like, units with assigned parking are renewing at a much higher rate than those without. All of a sudden, these three things are telling us a really clear picture, and giving us this big category that we probably want to think about investing in, in terms of driving additional renewal and sort of where our dollars should be spent for 2026. And more and more platforms, RentRata included, are investing in these tools right in the platform so that you don't have to do any copy and pasting. We're making it even easier the places that you collect this resident data. So for us, kind of facilitating these conversations between prospects and residents, you're building this really rich data set, about what folks really love about the property, kind of how they're talking about it to prospects. And so we've made it super easy for you to go right in and ask these types of questions kind of directly in the platform, to tap into that data really, really easily and identify, all of these trends, particularly around amenities. So keep an eye out for that kind of in the platforms that you're already using. I think more and more we're going to see this, platforms investing in these AI tools to help you tap into that data. Because the issue isn't the data itself. You have so much of it, and the story is there. It's just about how we help these property management folks, dig into that data and find these stories, to then use the dollars in the right way. So now we've kind of done our analysis, we've triangulated some of these key areas. Now we can actually start to break it down, as we build our budget into areas of high investment. These are kind of the top three amenities that we know we really want to put a lot of our dollars towards this year. These are proven retention drivers. We know that folks, who are positively talking about these amenities are going on to renew their leases. And this is where, we want to see the priority for actually, upgrades, additional investment, and spending our marketing dollars. Then we kind of have our second tier, which is maintenance mode. We know these are the amenities that are valuable, but they may not be super differentiating. They're continually perceived very positively by our residents, but maybe not as tied to retention. So this is probably an area that we want to spend maybe 30% of our budget. We want to maintain the quality, make sure that we're investing a little bit to kind of keep these, up to date, but maybe don't need as much active investment, or expansion. And then tier three, what are the things where we're spending our dollars today that actually have really low resident value? Maybe we're spending a ton of marketing dollars, towards promoting the pool, but, actual use case data in sort of our resident data is telling a bit of a different story. This is going to help us sort of move that investment around, and sort of move it away from some of those low resident value items and into the really high proven retention drivers. And we see some really interesting trends, from what AI is revealing. Across the board, the areas where we're seeing it's often a little bit overrated are those sort of elaborate fitness centers, the sort of really luxury items, resort-style pools, super high-end common areas. These are things that look great on marketing, but often the resident value is much lower. They're looking for more functional amenities. I think that's kind of the big trend that we've started to see is folks are looking for really functional, useful amenities, that kind of add to their lifestyle. So things that are often underrated, parking. It's not as glamorous, but this is something really functional, to our tenants, and residents that we might want to invest in a little bit more. Things like package management, maintenance responsiveness, those pet amenities, and co-working and high-speed internet. Like more and more kind of having great internet infrastructure, having spaces where people who work remote or in a hybrid environment, can work there at the community, these are places where, residents see and kind of have a really high investment in, and then, our team can kind of take that and run with it. So kind of apart from our operational budget, there's a huge implication here for our 2026 marketing budget strategy as well. And so kind of using all of this data that we have for 2025, we can make sure that we're spending our marketing dollars the most efficiently that we can by kind of using this AI analysis. So before the analysis, we might be spending 40% of our budget on that fitness center. Often we see, a lot of folks kind of leaning into the generic luxury living messaging, and have pretty broad demographic targeting. We're trying to cast a wide net. We're trying to, make sure occupancy is high and fill these units. But we could be, sort of narrowing our focus and really going after a very specific group. And so after that analysis, with some of these trends identified, we can start to move our budget towards promoting those really, 3 data-driven amenities, where we're seeing the highest correlation to renewals. We can actually develop some very specific resident pain point messaging. We know the areas that are being negatively perceived or the amenities, that particularly on social media might be getting, not as positive reviews. And there's a chance you've already started to address that or take steps towards it. And so now we can make sure, we're bringing that into our messaging and really addressing those things proactively. And ultimately, we're targeting the right type of residents who are going to renew their lease. It's the best fit for our community. And now we can start to zero in and be a little bit more specific with our targeting there. Not only that, but AI is great for content creation at scale. So our marketing teams are strapped. Often, they're trying to do a lot and spend these dollars and their time efficiently. And content creation takes a lot of time. And so AI can be hugely, hugely, important and helpful there as well. Once it's identified these trends, these sort of key areas that we want to move our marketing investment in, it can also help us, bring that into our marketing itself at scale. And so actually, prompting and kind of going in and saying, build me a calendar that highlights these things and really leans into the amenities that we know drive retention, all of a sudden can save you many, many hours in terms of building out those marketing calendars, and help you tap into those same trends that we're going to sort of use to build our operational budgets. And ultimately, a huge area that this is helpful into is that resident persona refinement. All of this sort of analysis and what AI can help us do is figure out who loves our top amenities. The areas that we're spending our dollars, that we're really investing in. All of a sudden, we have a lot of interesting demographic data. We can identify lifestyle preferences, communication styles. And that means we can start to attract residents who will renew, not just anyone who will sign the lease. We know that's the most efficient use of our time and dollars, is we want the right type of resident, moving into these communities and signing leases. And so this is a great way to zero in on the data that can help us refine our persona, and then spend, both our operational and marketing budgets towards going after that specific type of persona. And this lets us kind of build that really targeted outreach strategy. So let's say kind of using all of that AI data, we've identified that young professionals who value convenient parking are really the best fit for our community. All of a sudden, we can take that and start to do LinkedIn ads that are actually during commute hours. We can sort of do some next door posts in car dependent neighborhoods. We might want to do some Google ads around, apartment parking, folks who are kind of actively searching for that. And use Facebook retargeting, to find recent job relocations, maybe folks who are remote workers. And that's going to help us sort of get to this right persona and actually attract, the right type of person. And rather than casting a really broad net, now we're starting to cast, a very specific and targeted net, and use those dollars really, really efficiently to go after the type of person that we know will ultimately renew. So kind of leaving you with some big thoughts here, as you're building your 2026 budgets, it's time to stop funding assumptions and really start funding performance. And so all of this data that you already have, so far from this year, is going to be your guide. That's your map for kind of how to build your budget for next year. And so digging into that data is more important than ever. And AI is a great way to help us do this at scale, and transform those gut decisions and the sort of anecdotal feedback that we're getting, from our on-site teams into super ROI-driven investments. This is going to help us really be strategic in our amenity focus, and ultimately reduce costs across the board and improve retention. We're kind of taking the dollars away from things that we know don't drive retention and moving them towards the things that, we can see in the data really are, which ultimately will, increase NOI and occupancy as well. And again, we're kind of coming into these budget meetings with super data-backed budget requests that are going to get approved faster. This way our leadership team can see we've done the work here. We're coming in with the data to support these things, and it's sort of a no-brainer to approve these strategies and get that budget, ready and locked in for next year. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We have a couple minutes here for Q&A, so let me get in there and kind of see. I've seen a few questions I think come in. Yes, I am on the marketing team here at Rank Grata, so this is us kind of sharing a lot of what we're seeing from our clients and customers, and some of my own insights, just from marketing and the ways that I'm using AI to do this data analysis and finding a lot of success. Definitely. Okay, there's some interesting comments around, having an actual person at the property. That's definitely something too. Often you can find, from your social media data and this review data, maybe folks who are doing sort of an online tour or an on-demand tour. There's less positive feedback around that than actually, they're having really positive perceptions of the folks who are on site, the people who are leading these tours, who they're actually interacting with on site, might be getting super positive mentions. And so, kind of moving away from some of the on-demand or pre-recorded tours, and actually leaning into this on-site staff that we have that are often, one of our best assets. Awesome. If there are no more questions, we'll definitely share the recording and this presentation with everyone, so you can kind of get started and dig in on this. I'll also send just sort of like a 6-week plan, to kind of help you really start digging into this with a bunch of those prompts that you can just copy and paste, right into ChatGPT or Claude and get started on this. And we really appreciate all of you joining us. Thank you so much again, and good luck with budget season. Thanks all.